The cold always came early in Abilene. Not the kind that simply chapped skin and made the fire burn lower, but the sort that got into your bones, turned your blood syrup slow, and whispered in your ear that maybe you weren't meant to survive this winter, or the next. Clara May had known that chill her whole life. She'd worn it like a second skin ever since she could walk. The wind came off the prairie that morning like a blade, and Clara, 12 years old and barefoot, had stood outside the broken saloon door, watching smoke rise from what used to be her mama's room upstairs. Her mama's favorite dress, bright blue and speckled with little daisies, was all that remained, flapping like a ghost on a crooked clothesline behind the charred ruin. The sheriff never found who'd set the fire. He didn't look hard either. Folks didn't care much when women like Clara's mama died. Saloon girls weren't worth a bullet, much less justice. Clara figured that out early. She learned even faster that waiting around for someone to save her was a fool's game. So she stole a pair of boots from a dead man outside the livery, cut her hair with a broken bottle, and made herself disappear. Years passed. Enough that people forgot her name but not the eyes. Clara's eyes stayed the same, sharp, feral, a little too knowing. The kind of eyes that got her mistaken for dangerous even before she drew her pistol. She'd earned that pistol in a poker game she wasn't supposed to win, outwitting 3 grown men with bad tempers and worse hygiene. They didn't like losing to a woman. She left that town with a split lip and a loaded Colt. Ever since, it was her most honest companion. Life on the move wasn't romantic, no matter what the dime novels claimed. Most nights, Clara slept in dry creek beds or abandoned sheds, hands curled around the grip of her gun, ears trained to every snap of a twig. When she wasn't running from bounty hunters, she was chasing whispers, rumors of a man named Everett Rains. He was the first man she'd trusted since the fire. The last one too. He'd come into her life like a summer storm, sudden, loud, and full of charm. Clara had met him in Canyon Pass, where she was working under the name Cora Dean. He wore his outlaw status like it was stitched into his duster, but he had a smile that made you believe in miracles. And lies. Mostly lies. He said he'd seen something in her. Something better. A future with clean boots, steady work, and no more hiding. She believed him. God help her, she did. For 6 weeks they rode together. Laughed. Slept under stars. Dreamed. It felt like freedom until it wasn't. One morning, just outside Dead Mule Crossing, Everett told her to keep watch while he grabbed something from a depot storehouse. Said he'd be in and out in 5 minutes. Clara waited on that ridge for almost an hour before the shouting started. 2 men dead. 1 wounded. Gold missing. Everett was gone. She tried to explain, but no one wanted to hear it. Her face was posted across 6 counties in less than a week. Some prints called her the devil's sweetheart. Others went with the widow in dust. None of it was true except for the part about her being dangerous. By then she had to be. Now she rode alone, hunted like a coyote, with a name that turned doors shut and wagons wide around. Clara May had one goal left: find Everett. Not for revenge, though that burned hot some days, but because he'd stolen something more than her name. He'd taken her chance at redemption and she wanted it back. The winter that chased her into the mountains came earlier than she expected. Her horse died somewhere outside Silverpine, frostbitten hooves and lungs too brittle to fight the cold. Clara hadn't cried in years, but she stood over that animal for hours, unable to leave. It was the last thing in the world that hadn't betrayed her. She buried him with a hatchet. Said nothing. Kept walking. With the snow waist deep and her fingers stiff beyond feeling, Clara stumbled into a burned-out mining path that twisted through Black Hollow. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The wind howled like some old god that had forgotten mercy. Then, on the second night, through the blur of half-frozen lashes, she saw a light. A flickering amber glow, like a fire barely contained behind cracked shutters. A cabin. She dragged herself toward it, slipping more than walking. Her left leg ached from an old fall. Her shoulder pulsed where a bullet had grazed her weeks back. She reached the door and knocked, once, twice, then hammered with the last of her strength. No answer. Please, she rasped. Frozen to the bone. I'm begging you, just open the door. The silence was worse than the wind. She leaned her forehead against the wood. A sob built in her throat, sharp and foreign, but before it escaped, the door creaked open. A shotgun met her eyes first. Then a man's face. Weathered, pale, unreadable in the firelight behind him. Christ Almighty, he muttered. You look like death picked you up and dropped you halfway home. She smiled, weak and mean. Feels about right. He stepped aside. One night. You cause trouble, I'll put you back in the snow. Deal? She croaked. Clara stumbled inside. The heat hit her like a fist. She collapsed near the hearth without grace, shedding her coat and hat with trembling fingers. The man eyed her warily as he closed the door. He looked to be in his 50s, with a limp in his left leg and a face carved from ash and regret. His cabin was clean but sparse, rifles on the wall, dried meat strung near the beams, a cot with military corners. "You got a name?" he asked. "Clara," she said, too tired to lie. He raised an eyebrow. "Not Cora Dean? Or Belle Hawthorne? I seen posters. Lot of names for one girl." Her fingers closed around the grip of her revolver in her coat, but she didn't pull it. "If you're planning to collect, best know I shoot first." He snorted. "Ain't planning anything. Just want my stew to stay warm and my windows unshot." They didn't talk much after that. She slept hard and deep, only waking once when the wind screamed like a dying animal. In the morning he gave her coffee and dried jerky. She took both with shaky hands. "You a marshal?" she asked, noting the badges rusting above the hearth. "Was. Why quit?" He looked past her. "Didn't like what the job made me become." She nodded. "I understand that." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Storm's gonna last a week at least. You ain't walking out in that." "I wasn't planning to," she replied. That night, as the fire cracked low and the cold pressed against the cabin walls, Clara lay on the cot and stared at the rafters. She thought of her mama's dress, of Everett's lies, of the pistol by her side that still felt too heavy. The man, whose name she still didn't know, sat sharpening a knife in the corner. "I ain't gonna ask what you done," he said quietly, not looking up. "But I will ask what you're gonna do next." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she listened to the wind outside, to the aching hush of snow burying the world. "I'm gonna find the man who ruined my life," she whispered. "And I'm gonna ask him if it was worth it." The man nodded as if he'd been waiting for that. "Well," he said, "you better survive the storm first." Clara smiled in the dark. It was a tired smile, full of old wounds and unfinished sentences. But it was real. And for the first time in years she didn't feel like she was running. Not yet. But soon. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke, boiled coffee, and something Clara couldn't quite place. Gun oil and loneliness, maybe. She sat near the fire, wrapped in an old wool blanket the man had tossed her without a word. Her skin prickled from the sudden warmth after so long in the cold, but the real sting came from his silence. He watched her like a trapper studies a caged animal, not cruel, not kind, just calculating. "Name's Silas," he said at last. His voice was rough, like sand scraped over stone. "Figured it was time you knew, since you're eatin' my food." Clara looked up from the chipped enamel mug in her hands. "Silas," she repeated as though testing the weight of it. "That short for anything?" "Not that matters," he said, settling onto a three-legged stool beside the hearth. His eyes were gray, not dull but worn down like river stones that had seen too much current. He didn't smile, didn't scowl, just watched. She sipped the coffee. It was bitter, stronger than it had any right to be. "You live up here alone?" "Used to have a dog," he said. "But it died. That was the end of that." Silence settled back in like dust on old shelves. The storm outside howled louder now, snow tapping on the window panes in slow, deliberate rhythms. Clara listened to it while her thoughts pulled taut in her chest. She couldn't stay here long. She didn't know what kind of man Silas really was, but she knew this. Kindness had teeth in these parts and debts were rarely paid in coin. "You plan on turning me in?" she asked, eyes fixed on the flames. He didn't answer right away. "Then, if I was, you'd be shackled already." "Why not?" He shrugged. "Ain't my business what you did. Just my business what you do while you're under my roof." Clara weighed that. She wanted to believe it. She'd met men like Silas before, quiet, solitary types who preferred a gun and a wall over company. Some were safe. Some weren't. All had scars. He noticed her studying him and gave a small, humorless smile. "You look like you're waiting for me to sprout horns." "Just don't want to wake up hog-tied," she muttered. "Then don't give me a reason," he said, standing. "You hungry or not?" She followed him to the small kitchen area, where a pot of beans bubbled over a blackened stove. He spooned 2 helpings into mismatched bowls and handed one over. Clara ate with the sort of hunger that had nothing to do with manners. Silas didn't comment. Halfway through the meal she said, "How long you been out here?" "Long enough to forget the calendar." She raised an eyebrow. "That a joke?" "Might be," he said, his mouth twitching in something that almost resembled a smile. The warmth between them was slow to build, more a thaw than a spark. Clara didn't trust it, not yet, but she didn't push it away either. Silence returned, not quite comfortable but no longer hostile. Later she helped gather more wood. Her limbs still ached, and the wind cut through her coat like claws, but she welcomed the motion. It gave her something to do besides think. Silas worked beside her without speaking, his limp more noticeable now, though he moved like he'd learned to live with pain long ago. They piled the wood near the hearth and sat again, backs against opposite walls. Outside, the storm had turned savage. Snow hammered the roof and the windows groaned beneath the weight. "You ever kill anyone?" Silas asked suddenly, voice flat. Clara didn't blink. "Yes. On purpose." She looked him in the eye. "Yes." He nodded once, not judging, just confirming. "Then you'll understand why I don't ask what for." Clara set her mug down gently. "You? Once? What happened?" "I stopped being a lawman." That hung in the air like smoke from a bad fire. She didn't press further. She understood more from that one sentence than a whole confession could have revealed. He wasn't proud. He wasn't broken. Just done. The next morning, Clara woke early, body sore but stronger. She found Silas already at the stove, frying salt pork and eggs like it was any ordinary day and not the edge of the world outside. "Storm's getting worse," he said without turning. "Might be trapped a while." "How long's a while?" "Could be days. Could be 2 weeks." Clara exhaled through her nose. That was time she didn't have. Every day she stayed still was a day closer to someone finding her. The bounty on her head had gone up since Canyon Pass. She'd heard it herself, whispered through saloon doors. 2,000 for Clara May, dead or alive. Most preferred dead. Easier that way. She sat across from him at the table, eating in silence again. Halfway through he asked, "What's waiting for you when you leave here?" She hesitated, then said, "A man." Silas didn't blink. "The kind worth dying over?" "No," she said. "The kind worth killing." He paused a beat, nodded. "Thought so." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. They spent the rest of the day repairing cracks in the walls, bolting shutters, and bringing in snow to melt for drinking water. There was rhythm to it, almost comfort. Clara had never lived slow. She didn't know if she liked it or hated it, only that it felt strange. That night, as they sat near the fire, Silas cleaned his shotgun with practiced ease. Clara polished her revolver, checking every chamber. They worked in unspoken harmony, like two musicians in different bands who'd accidentally found the same song. "You're good with that thing?" Silas said, nodding at her gun. "I had to be." "What's your plan when you find this man?" Clara considered. "I don't know yet. Might ask him why. Might just shoot him." Silas didn't flinch. Sometimes the asking's worse than the shooting. Clara looked at him. "You ever lose someone?" He rubbed his jaw aside. "A daughter. Long time ago." The quiet after that was complete. Not even the wind dared to intrude. Clara didn't ask how. Some stories wrote themselves in the creases of a man's face. The next day passed slow, the way days do when there's nowhere to go. Clara helped with chores, fixed a broken hinge on the supply closet, and learned how to gut a rabbit the way Silas did, with precision and no apologies. They talked little, but when they did, the words mattered. Silas asked what books she used to read, and she confessed she couldn't. Her mother never had time to teach her. He didn't laugh or pity her. He simply said, "Next storm I'll read to you." The fourth night, just as they settled in, there was a noise outside. Not wind. Not snow. A soft crunch, deliberate. Silas froze. He motioned Clara to stay low, then moved to the window, lifting the curtain a sliver. "Riders," he whispered. 3. Maybe 4. Clara's breath caught. Her hand slid to her revolver, instinct taking over. Silas grabbed his shotgun and doused the firelight with one swift kick of snow from the hearth bucket. They crouched in the dark, listening. Hoofbeats in snow. Muffled voices. "They stop here, we hold." "If they knock, you let me talk," Silas murmured. Clara nodded. Her mouth was dry. She could feel the blood thumping behind her eyes. This was it. Maybe bounty hunters. Maybe worse. Maybe Everett had found her first. The horses stopped just outside. Pause. Then a voice, slick as oil. "Heard tell a woman came through this way. Pretty. Wanted. Dangerous. Seen her?" Clara's body coiled. She knew that voice. Jeb Hollis. One of Everett's men. She'd last seen him dragging a wounded deputy through saloon doors like a trophy. Silas didn't answer. The voice tried again. "You got 2 seconds before we come in firing." Still silence. Then the unmistakable sound of boots hitting snow. Someone dismounted. Clara looked to Silas, eyes wide. He gave her a single nod, slow and sure. She crouched behind the table. He moved to the door. The handle turned. The section ends there, but the story doesn't. The door flew open with a burst of snow and fury. Silas moved first, no hesitation, no warning. His shotgun roared like thunder, and the figure in the doorway crumpled before he ever had a chance to shout. Clara didn't breathe. She couldn't. Her fingers curled around the grip of her revolver, pulse drumming in her ears like war drums. Outside, the remaining riders cursed, ducked for cover. One fired blindly toward the cabin, the shot punching through the upper window, spraying wood splinters into the room. Clara dropped to her knees behind the table, heart thudding against her ribs like a prisoner demanding release. Silas cocked his shotgun again, already moving. "Stay down," he muttered, voice low but sharp. He pulled a second shell from his vest and reloaded without missing a beat. Clara knew they had seconds. Maybe less. If they rushed the cabin together, they'd overrun it. 4 men could take 1 injured veteran and a half-starved outlaw if they came hard and fast enough. But the snow was thick. The wind wild. It would slow them. "They'll circle around," Clara whispered. "Try the back." "I know." Another bullet hit the wall behind her, too close. Clara's jaw clenched. She couldn't stay crouched like some frightened doe. That wasn't her. That had never been her. "I'm going upstairs," she said, moving. Silas didn't argue. He tossed her a pouch of extra bullets, then shifted toward the back door. "One's out cold. The rest'll break soon if they think we've got numbers." Clara didn't respond. Her boots thundered on the steps, the old wood groaning beneath her as she climbed. Upstairs was dark, the only light filtering through a cracked dormer window half-iced from the storm. She crouched low, pried it open just enough to see. 3 riders. 2 on the left flank, 1 to the rear. Jeb Hollis was among them. She saw the gleam of his long coat, the stupid gold ring he always wore on his trigger finger. Her teeth clenched. She exhaled once. A long, slow breath that cleared her head. Then she steadied her revolver on the sill, sighted the rear rider sneaking toward the cabin's back. 1 shot. He dropped without a sound, buried in snow. Someone shouted. Gunfire erupted from below. Clara ducked, reloaded, rolled to the side as splinters exploded from the window frame. They'd seen her. 2 left, she called down. Silas didn't answer, but another blast echoed from his shotgun, followed by a grunt and a muffled curse. Jeb's voice rang out then, slicing through the storm. "You can't keep this up, Clara. Come on out and maybe I won't drag you back in pieces." Clara moved fast, back to the window, her revolver already raised. She fired twice. Missed the first. The second tore a strip from Jeb's coat, made him dive. "You ain't dragging no one," she hissed. More shouting. Another burst of gunfire. Then silence. Clara held her breath. Listen. The wind howled. Snow hissed against the roof. Then the sound of retreat. Hooves beating a hasty rhythm into the hills. She waited. Counted to 10. Then to 20. Finally she stood. Moved downstairs slowly. Silas was by the door, blood running down his arm. His face was pale, jaw tight, but his eyes were clear. Clara rushed to him, but he waved her off. "Just a graze. Let me see." He sat with a grunt, wincing as she tore a strip from the old curtain and pressed it to the wound. "Damn fool," she muttered. "You should have stayed behind cover. I've been in worse spots." He gave her a faint smile. "Besides, I ain't dead yet." Clara tied the cloth tight. "That was Jeb Hollis. He's Everett's man." Silas nodded slowly. "Then Everett's close. Too close." She stood, paced once, then stopped. "They know where I am now. They'll come back, more of them. I can't stay here." Silas didn't argue. He looked tired in a way that sat deep in his bones, but his voice was steady. "You've got a few hours, maybe less, before they bring the rest. You need to go before then." "And you?" "I'll hold them off. Long as I can." "No," she said quickly. "You're already wounded. They'll kill you. Maybe. But I'm not letting them take this place. Not without a fight." Clara looked around the cabin, at the battered stove, the old cot, the firewood stacked carefully by the hearth. It wasn't much, but it was his. "I'm not leaving you to die," she said. "You won't help me by staying," Silas said calmly. "You've got something left to do. Someone to face. Don't waste it on me." Her throat tightened. She hadn't cried in years, not even when her mother died. But now her vision blurred, her jaw clenched against something too heavy to name. "You saved me," she whispered. "I didn't save you," Silas said. "I just reminded you who you were." Clara moved toward her things, packed fast. Bullets, knife, her coat. Every moment mattered now. She paused only once at the door. "If I live, I'll come back," she said. Silas smiled faintly. "If you live, don't come back. Live free." She hesitated, then turned and vanished into the snow. The wind hit her like a slap, but her legs moved with purpose. She knew the mountain's edge. If she could get down the western trail by nightfall, she could disappear. Head south. Track Everett from the canyons near Copper Ridge. But she didn't run. Not exactly. Not anymore. Clara May walked into the storm like she belonged there. Each step forward pulled pieces of the past from her shoulders. Everett had lied. Had used her. Had ruined whatever future she tried to build. But now she wasn't the girl who'd waited by a depot storehouse. She was the woman who'd fought off killers in a snowstorm. Who'd stood by a wounded man and made a promise with her eyes. She made it to the lower trail by dusk. There were no stars. No moon. Just white and black and breath steaming from her lips. As she crested the ridge, she paused. Looked back once, just once. The cabin was a shadow in the distance, a single flicker of flame behind a shuttered window. Then she turned forward again, eyes sharp. She had a name to reclaim. And a man to find. The snow didn't slow her. Not now. Not anymore. The desert wind stung Clara's cheeks as she rode hard across the copper-colored plain, each hoofbeat carving her vengeance into the dust. Her coat flapped like a broken sail behind her, hair tangled in the wind, but her eyes never strayed from the far-off ridge, the one that led to Hollow Rock. That's where Everett would be. That's where it ended. 3 days since she left Silas behind. 3 days of rationing dried meat, drinking meltwater from rocks, and sleeping with her revolver against her chest. The snow gave way to heat, to cracked stone and vultures riding air currents high above. She'd crossed canyons and creeks, avoided riders and moved like smoke through the land. But each mile burned away the old Clara, the hunted woman. What remained was sharper. Tempered. She reached the outskirts of Hollow Rock just after dusk. The sun, swollen and red as a blood moon, slipped behind the cliffs. Buildings leaned like tired drunks. Paint peeled from saloon doors. It was a mining town once, before the silver dried up and the outlaws took over. Now it was Everett's playground. Clara had seen it before, camps where law and cruelty shook hands. She dismounted behind a stable, patting her mare's neck. "Wait here, girl," she whispered. "Won't be long." The street was mostly empty, dust swirling in the orange twilight. She moved down the boardwalk with a steady pace, boots echoing against the dry wood. Her coat covered the revolver at her hip, but her hand never strayed far. Then she heard it, the music. A tinny piano note drifting out of the saloon at the end of the road. The Red Moon. That's where he'd be. Everett always liked making himself the center of any room. She stepped inside, swallowed by pipe smoke and stale whiskey. Faces turned. Some stared too long. Others knew better. But one man near the bar froze mid-sip, eyes going wide. "Clara?" he muttered. "Clara May." She didn't answer. Just kept walking. Everett sat at a table in the back, flanked by 2 men, one chewing a toothpick, the other fingering a knife. Everett himself was still as polished as ever, gold chain across his vest, clean-shaven face, smug as the day he betrayed her. He didn't rise, didn't blink. "I'll be damned," he said, voice smooth as oiled leather. "Back from the dead." Clara stopped just out of arm's reach. Her eyes locked on his like 2 pistols drawn at the same time. "You knew I wasn't dead," she said. "You just hoped someone else would finish the job." He smiled lazily. "You always were hard to kill. Never knew when to quit." "You used me," she said, voice flat. "Set me up in Canyon Pass. Left me to rot while you ran with the gold." Everett tilted his head. "We all make hard calls, Clara. Thought you'd understand. It was business." Clara took a single step forward. "You killed the marshal. You framed me." He leaned back, arms spreading across the chair like he owned the whole room. "You weren't exactly clean. Don't act like you were just some poor girl gone astray. You pulled that trigger too." Clara's jaw tightened. "I pulled it to save you." Everett's smile faded. Just for a moment. Then it was back. "And now what? You gonna shoot me in front of all these fine folks? After all this time?" A hush had fallen over the room. Glasses lowered. Cards stopped shuffling. Even the piano player went still. Clara didn't move. Didn't blink. "I didn't come here to argue, Everett. I came to finish it." One of his men stood. The one with the knife. "Boss." Everett held up a hand. "Let her talk." Clara's voice didn't waver. "I gave everything to a man who treated loyalty like a game. You left me bleeding in the snow. Now I want what's mine." "What's yours?" Everett laughed. "A memory? A name? What's left of you isn't worth $2 in a saloon pot. Wrong, Clara said. What's left of me is the bullet with your name on it. She moved then, fast. Her revolver was up before the knife man could reach for his. One shot dropped him. The room exploded into chaos, chairs tipping, men shouting. Clara ducked behind a table as Everett's second man fired. She returned a shot and caught him in the shoulder, spinning him to the floor. Everett was gone. Slipped out the back in the confusion. Clara ran. Out the back door into the alley, heart pounding, legs flying over mud and trash and broken crates. The sky was full dark now, stars blazing cold and uncaring. She caught a flicker of Everett's coat as he ran down the hill toward the old mining tunnels. Of course he'd run there. He knew them like a rat knew a maze. She followed. Down into the hollow ground, where old rails curled like snakes and the air smelled of rust and ghosts. The tunnel swallowed sound. Her footsteps echoed in strange directions. But she kept going deeper, revolver ready. Clara, his voice called from somewhere ahead. You really want to die down here? She didn't answer. He fired blindly. The shot sparked off stone behind her. She ducked low, crept forward, boots soft on gravel. She could hear his breath now, ragged, uneven. He was scared. Good. She turned a corner and there he was trying to reload, hands shaking. Don't, she said. He froze. Looked up at her, sweat shining on his face. You don't have to do this. Yes, she said. I do. He opened his mouth to speak, but Clara didn't wait. She fired once. The shot echoed through the mine like a thunderclap. Everett dropped, lifeless. No final words. No redemption. Just silence. Clara stood over him, breathing hard. The mine trembled slightly. Dust rained from above. She turned away. She climbed out before dawn, the sky pink with promise. Her coat was torn, her face streaked with dirt and blood. But she was whole. She returned to the stable, her mare still waiting. She didn't ride right away. She just stood there, letting the morning wash over her. For the first time in years she wasn't running. She wasn't hunted. She was free. And somewhere up in the mountains, if Silas was still breathing, she knew he'd be proud. She mounted the horse, turned west toward nothing in particular. The world was wide. And for once she wasn't afraid of it. As the sun rose, Clara smiled, not because she'd won but because she'd endured. Because the girl who froze at a stranger's doorstep was gone. What remained was the woman who opened the door herself.